Sanding. Number one, if you can avoid it at all, do not buy cheap sandpaper. It makes your life miserable. It breaks, it tears, it falls apart, it sheds its grit everywhere, and it is really difficult to use. Buy good sandpaper if you can. The brand names, I'm not going to recommend any one specific brand name. Just get a brand name if you can. You will be much happier. If you can't, use what you got. It's not that big a deal, but you'll be pleasantly surprised if you've been using super cheap sandpaper and you make the move to a brand name. I just use rubber sanding pads, and I try to keep all my grits separate. So although it doesn't say it, this is 150, 180, 220, 320. I try to keep all these separate to avoid cross-contamination of those grits as much as I can. The two power sanders that I use, one is a 5-inch random orbit. The other is a triangular oscillating. Both of these have insanely good dust collection, but really random orbit sanders that you get from the big box store, your local hardware store, will be just fine. In any case, when you use a power sander, you can go through these woods really fast. You need to be super careful. Be very light in your touch, be very deliberate about where you're sanding, how you're sanding, why you're sanding. If you are going to use a random orbit sander on the sides of your guitar, I hope you don't need to. I hope that they're smooth enough that you can just hit it with a flat block and you'll be just fine. Especially a 5-inch random orbit. You see how these pads overhang on each side? Well, that can be a real issue if you hit this too hard, because what's going to happen is that as it's rotating, when that pad rotates out, it folds over the edge just a little bit. And as imperceptible as it is right now, even when I'm pushing on it, it happens. And when those pads fall over the edges, it's going to round these off really, really fast. And remember, you've only got 2 to 2.5 millimeters to work with, probably even a little less after you scraped it. And you can go right through those bindings and you will be having a pretty bad day. So be very careful anywhere you're using the power sanders. They can run right through your top, through your sides. I mean, we're dealing with less than 3 millimeters of wood anywhere we are in this guitar. And once you start going thinner, you can run into some real problems. If you're going to use a power sander on the back of your guitar, it's a little safer. But I knew a guy one time who sanded the back of the guitar to perfection, put a finish on, didn't like how it went, sanded it off, prepped the surface again to perfection, applied a second coat of finish, and in the sanding process, discovered that there was an area about the size of a baseball that was thin enough to just about puncture through with his index finger. That person was not very happy. The lesson is, be very delicate, very purposeful about what you're sanding. Just sand far enough to get those scratches out. Try not to do any more. And if you can, use a hand sanding block and go in the direction of the grain. And even if you do use a power sander, you want to finish up every pass with the power sander with a block. That block you want to go in the direction of the grain, because if you don't finish up with the block, you really can't see them now, but what you're going to end up with, especially with the random orbital, is a million little circle scratches that you can't see yet, but you will. So always follow up with a sanding block in the direction of the grain. All right, let's get to sanding. This is going to be fun. All right, the back's at 180. I highly recommend a good dust mask or full face mask when you're doing this process. Be very careful when you're sanding the shoulders up here. We do not want to change the profile where the neck has met the body, but if you're already glued up and you have your neck attached already, pay no attention to that comment. Oh, okay, so this is exciting. I found a ding in my binding right there that we can fill with black super glue. Sweet. Don't know if you can even see it with the camera, but it's right there. All right, black CA. If I did not have this glue, one of the tendencies would be to try and sand it out, and that is just not going to work because we do not want to make our bindings any thinner than we have to. Okay, I've let that sit a second. I'm going to hit it with accelerator. Now, since this is in a kind of a delicate area, in this bend right here, if I came in with sandpaper, I could get something out of whack here. So I'm going to try to scrape it first. And then sand it with 180. And it's almost gone. I'm going to do one more. Now with the black CA, I can get away with the spray accelerator, but if I was using clear, medium, or even clear thin, the accelerator can cause that to bubble and get white marks in it that sometimes you can't sand out because it just becomes part of your filler. On raw wood, it's not as big of a deal as if it was on your finish, so you can try it with or without accelerator, but definitely if you're using it on a finish to drop fill, don't use the spray accelerator. And even if you're coming in with a scraper in an area like this, you still want to be careful that you're not rolling over the edge with that scraper, whether it's a razor or an actual scraper. When you use a scraper on an area like this, especially in a bend, you can get kind of this chatter on there and get a rough edge with that scraper. We can get that out of there. All right, that's about as perfect as I'm going to get. Just finished it up, hitting it with the 180, just really kind of focusing on the end of this, dragging it in the waist. Looks good, feels good, happy with that. Let's move on. On these sound port holes, I'm really just looking to kind of break the edges of them, soften it up a little bit so that a finish will stick to it a little bit. But I also want to be careful because these pieces in between can be a little fragile and I don't want to crack that. Sometimes I will use these sanding twigs for that. I've looked at this pretty carefully and I think it is looking good for 180. I'm going to keep going on the back and sides up the grits, so 180, 220, 320, and I'm not going to touch the top yet because in the pour filling process this is going to get so messy. I want to leave my shellac protective layer on the front and just leave it, because when I keep setting the guitar top down like this, it's just going to get goop and muck all over it. It's just going to get to be a huge mess. So I'm going to leave the top the way it is and just keep working on backs and sides and prepare those. And then once those are done, then I'll move to the top. Dust mask. 220. I'm going to use 220 to break the edge of the binding. And if you end up going cross grain of your end wedge when you're doing the sides, just come in and try to touch that up, going with the grain as much as you can. $320. $320 is just about going to be polishing the wood, but not quite. It's going to have probably a somewhat of a satin sheen to it. Just wiping it down with a rag to get most of the dust off of there. Now, if you wanted to take this to 320, leave the dust on it and take shellac and take a pad and kind of rub that into there and try to use the shellac as a binder to keep that dust in the pores. You certainly can do that. Following the contour with my hand, making sure that there isn't anything that I need to attend to. Like this, I'm feeling something happening right there. Okay. Well, whatever it was, it's gone. That's good. Okay, that is sanded. Looks good. And now we are ready to fill the pores.